Tonight it's my pleasure to introduce you to our keynote speaker. He's former Pinellas County Sheriff Everett Rice. I will allow him to more fully detail his credentials. However, I will offer these points. Everett Rice earned his Juris Doctorate from Stetson Law School in 1984. He has served in the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office for 33 years, 16 of those as Sheriff of Pinellas County. He served one term in the Florida House of Representatives, representing District 54, which, who represents that district now? Come on.
Ahern Fresh.
Who?
Ahern.
Larry Ahern. Absolutely. Where he co-sponsored. Oh, well then tell me.
54 is fresh. Yeah, fresh.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tucker, I know you know. While serving in the Florida House of Representatives, he co-sponsored the Jessica Lunsford Act. Currently, Everett Rice lends his skill as an attorney with the Tampa law firm of Cohen, Foster, Romine, specializing in state and federal criminal defense, white-collar criminal defense, and civil litigation. At this time, I would love to introduce you to Everett Rice.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening. First, I'd like to thank you for inviting me here. I want to thank you for all the work you guys do, guys and gals, to protect our Constitution and our freedoms. Most of you should be aware that the office of sheriff is one of the last vestiges of the old system, where you have an elected local official who's in charge of law enforcement, and is actually the sheriff is the only constitutionally elected law enforcement official left in the state. And it's the first person and the last person that people at the local level look to protect their freedoms. The sheriff doesn't answer to the county commission. The sheriff doesn't answer to the county manager or county administrator. The sheriff answers directly to the people. And it's an important distinction between the sheriff and, say, the chief of police, the highway patrol, or even the FDLE. The sheriff is the only elected official that has countywide jurisdiction and complete authority over matters of the criminal law. It's elected and accountable. And I went to work for the sheriff in let's say 40 years ago. After I spent 4 years in the Merchant Marine, and I learned to respect the office of sheriff. And over the years, I rose through the ranks. I was promoted to, and I served in every single rank in the sheriff's office, including sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and chief of detectives. When I was chief of detectives, it became apparent to me that the sheriff was not really doing the best job in the world. He wasn't doing what he should be doing. And I couldn't be loyal to him, so I left to go to law school. And then in 1988, after practicing law for 2 years, I ran for sheriff, and I beat the incumbent 2-1 Republican in the Republican primary. And then I was reelected for 3 more terms, for a total of 4 terms. A lot of people ask me why I'm running for sheriff. Well, there's 2 questions there. First question is, why did I leave in the first place? And the second question is, what made me change my mind and want to go back? Well, let me tell you about why I decided to run for sheriff again. About 3 or 4 months ago, many of you may have read in the paper that the sheriff had admitted to a newspaper reporter that he was thinking about running again, which would be his 3rd term, and then quitting and asking the governor to appoint his chief deputy to become the sheriff. Well, most people can see what the sheriff was trying to do. He was trying to stick his chief in there without an election. And I received dozens and dozens of phone calls about this. It was not a very smart thing, I don't think, for the sheriff to admit. He, what a smart thing he would be thinking of, and then he admitted to a reporter. But anyway, I got lots of calls to come back. And I consulted with my family and a few friends and decided to do it, because I think that office of sheriff still belongs to the people. And nobody that's in that office, the sheriff or anybody else, has the right to anoint somebody else to subvert the voters' will. The sheriff needs to be selected by the people, not the governor. See, the governor appoints an interim sheriff if something happens to the current sheriff. And that's exactly what he admitted that he had intended to do. And to me, it was very offensive. But that leads to the other question is really, why did I leave the sheriff's office in the first place in 2004? And it was a matter of term limits and a matter of a promise that I made to the voters in 1996. And if many of you were here then, you will remember that there was a guy who was this Clearwater City Commissioner. He got upset with the county commission, and he decided he was going to pass an amendment to the county charter which would limit the terms of the county commissioners to 2 terms. At that point, there were no term limits for county elected officials. Anyway, this guy got a referendum going, and he had a petition circulating that would, if the voters passed it, it would put term limits not only on the commission, county commission, but also on the sheriff and the other 4 officers. Well, I looked at that petition, and it was apparent to me that it was illegal. Because as the sheriff, I knew that I was not a county charter officer. Even though I was an elected county official, I was not controlled by the county charter. My office, that is the office of sheriff, was created by the state constitution and was regulated only by the state statutes. So I instigated a lawsuit against the term limit movement. Not because I was against term limits, because this movement was in derogation to the independence of the office of sheriff. You know, the way you take elected positions away from the people, the first thing you do is you try to make them term limited. Second thing you do is you make them nonpartisan. And then the third thing you do is you say, well, why do we need them anyway? They're nonpartisan, their terms are limited. Well, why don't we just have an appointed county chief of police? But to me, this movement to limit the terms of the sheriff was nothing but a step down that slippery slope to get rid of the office. So I instigated a lawsuit. Now this is 1996, and the office of sheriff and the other officers and some of the county commissioners, we were all up for re-election. So here I am, and everybody knows the term limits are popular. If you get the question on the ballot, it always passes. So I knew it was going to pass unless I could get a court to keep it off the ballot. So I instigated a lawsuit, and that I was not the party to the lawsuit, but I had a lawyer friend instigated on behalf of a taxpayer and a voter. I had 2 trial court rulings against me, or we had 2 trial court rulings against us, because judges don't want to, they don't want to do anything that's not politically popular. Many judges routinely make political decisions and not legal decisions. So anyway, I couldn't get the trial court to join the question from going on the ballot. Here I am facing an election with the same voters that know that I'm trying to keep them from voting on term limits. So I made a promise. I said, and it was simple. I said, look, out of respect for the will of the people, I will not run again after 2 more terms, which is what the term limits said. So in November, might have been in September, of 96, this charter amendment passed, and we all had term limits on us promised to follow those term limits, but I said, I'm telling you right now, they're illegal. So they had 2 District Court of Appeals rulings against me after the election. And then finally in 2002, after 6.5 years, the Florida Supreme Court agreed that the term limits in the Pinellas County Charter was illegal. So it was thrown out. They could have limited the terms of the county commission by charter amendment, but because that was tied to the same ballot question, the term limits for the commissioners was also thrown out. So today we do not have term limits in this county for elected county officials. But out of respect for the voters, I left in 2004. I kept my promise. And now I'm back. I honor the you understand that what I just described to you is not something that can be reduced to a non-second political soundbite. So I never made an issue out of it. Until people ask me now, they say, Sheriff or Everett, why are you running for sheriff again? And I say, well, the real question is, why did I leave in the first place? And that is because I made a promise to the voters in '96 that I would impose on myself their term limits even though they were illegal. That coupled with the fact that I was offended by the fact that our sheriff thought that he was going to, suggested that he was going to run and get elected, which he would have because he's the incumbent. And incidentally, except for that, I have no criticism at all for our sheriff. But he was going to get reelected and then quit and have the governor appoint somebody else. That somebody's coming to speak to you at your next meeting, I think, according to Chris. But not only did it offend me, probably one of the biggest defenders of the independent office of sheriff, it offended a lot of people, and they called me and they imposed on me to run again, and I'm ready. Now, you know, obviously I think I'm the best qualified. There's like 2 other Republicans and 3 Democrats and 1 third-party guy out there. They're all running for sheriff. And I will tell you that I think that if you look at my credentials and my background and my track record, you will find that I'm the only one that's qualified. Or at least the best qualified. I spent almost all of my adult life at the sheriff's office, the last 16 as the sheriff, and I'm the biggest defender of that office. And one of the ways you lose that office of sheriff is when you have sheriffs that are either weak or compromising. They're not willing to defend the office against the liberal newspaper, against county commissioners who don't like the sheriff having all that authority. Or you have a sheriff that's involved in a scandal. When these things happen, that's when that office is taken away from you, just like it has been in many states in this nation. Most states in the Northeast, they might still have a sheriff, but the sheriff is not even a political figurehead anymore because they don't have any authority. But today, the office of sheriff is the only elected official directly accountable to the people for law enforcement matters. And that's important. It's very important. So at least the 16 years I was there, you had a sheriff that was willing to defend not only the people and their property rights and their rights in their homes, you had a sheriff that was willing to defend the office against a lot of criticism and a lot of folks that wanted to take it away. I will tell you that I never, ever asked the county commission when I was a sheriff to raise taxes. There were many years when I was a sheriff that we had these budget proposals that asked for more money than the county was willing to give me. the end, after the negotiations, I settled on what the county commission said that I could have, which was usually a fair share. But I never went before the county commission and said there's going to be blood in the streets if you don't give me the money I want. Never. Now, if it got to the point where the sheriff was totally unable to perform basic public safety functions, that's a different thing, but it hasn't happened. I am opposed to taxes. That's why I'm a Republican. One of the main reasons why I'm a Republican. Because I know that for every additional tax, for every time the taxes are raised, for every time the government, whether it's city hall, county, state, or federal, creates a new regulation, it is nothing but another restriction on our freedoms. That's all it is. And the government is real good at regulating its own people. They take our money and they regulate us with it. But they don't do a very good job of regulating the really bad people. I remember back in the 70s and 80s when crime was really bad. We had a revolving door prison system. I was one of the leaders in this state on what we call the STOP Amendment, Stop Turning Out Prisoners. And all that proposal simply was to require that when somebody was sentenced to prison, that they had to do 85% of their time. That's all it was. Because at the time, most people that were sent to state prison were doing between 20 and 40% of the time they were actually served to. And then they were kicked out and pushed out, mainly because of overcrowding. And there was no integrity in a judge's prison sentence. And the crime just went up. There was no punishment for crime. So Charlie Wells and I led the charge in this state for a state amendment on our Constitution, and it simply said if a judge sentences somebody to prison, they got to do 85% of their time. In other words, the prison says the system cannot give them more than 15% good or gain time. When I was in the legislature, I was only there 2 years. I didn't run for re-election. There was a case called New Haven, City of New Haven versus Suzette Kilo. Many of you will remember that. In that case, the City of New Haven, Connecticut, had decided that they wanted Suzette's property, which was downtown, nice little house. I think it had been in the family for years. It was her house. And the city wanted to take it away from her because they needed that parcel of land to give to a developer. So the city of New Haven used its power of eminent domain to condemn Suzette's property and took the property away from her. Now they had to pay her. It was questionable whether they paid her, what it was worth. But what if she didn't want to sell it at all? No amount of money would be enough, right? Anyway, the city condemned her property, took away from her, paid her for it. She sued. When that case got to the U.S. Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court said it's all right under our Constitution, the Fifth Amendment, to take people's property with just compensation for economic reasons. In other words, the real issue in that case was, what is a public purpose for the use of eminent domain? Now, most of us agree that the government does have the right, probably should have the right to build highways, or prisons, or schools. And they have the power of eminent domain to take that from private people. They got to pay them for it. In this case, it wasn't for what Suzette argued. That's not a public purpose. It was to build a mall and redevelop the downtown area to increase the tax base. Anyway, when I read this case, I was totally incensed that the government would have the power, according to the Supreme Court, to take our land away from us and give it to somebody else to develop it. But that's exactly what that case said. So I got to looking around the state of Florida, and our Attorney General at the time said that does not happen in Florida. What happened in New Haven, New London, did not happen here. The truth of the matter is that under the Florida authorities, particularly city government, had been taking property away from people for years under the power of eminent domain and giving it to private developers to increase the tax base under the guise of removing slum and blight. So after that case came out, it was quite clear that if the city or the county or the state didn't like the way a neighborhood looked, they could take all that land away from the owners and give it to developers for the purpose of removing blight. And it was happening all over the state. So within 2 days after the New London case came down, I proposed a ballot amendment, an amendment for the legislature to pass to put on the ballot so the people of this state could vote to change our Constitution so that under Florida law, no land can be taken for economic reasons. And I tried like hell to get the legislature to pass that resolution so that the people had an opportunity to vote to amend our Constitution to stop that. Well, I couldn't get them to put it on the ballot as a state constitutional amendment, but with the leadership and the help of Marco Rubio, it is in the state law. So that now, your city government, your county government, your special districts, and the state cannot take people's land under the power of eminent domain to remove blight. And essentially, they can't do it for economic reasons. And if anybody asks me, what I did when I was in the legislature, that is probably the most important. That's the thing that I'm the most proud of. Because when I read that decision, I was downright sick. Your city government, any city government in this state, up until we passed this law, had the power to take your land away from you and give it to a developer. Now, if that's not in derogation of a basic right, nothing is. But granted, it's a property right, and I know the issue about, property rights aren't expressly enumerated in the Constitution. Well, we know they're there. We have a right to own property. The government has no right. They have to keep their hands off of it. But that sure as hell wasn't true in New London, Connecticut. But of course, you know what? Now that the bubble has burst and there's no more land boom anymore, this isn't happening. But as soon as it happens, as soon as the market comes back and you got a developer that wants to develop an area, all they got to do is go to City Hall. Not in Florida, but in most states, go to City Hall and say, hey, take that land away from those people. We'll pay you for it. We'll put a nice mall there. And we're going to increase the tax value for you. And we're going to get that blight out of there. That's the status of the law in many states. Not in Florida because we passed that bill. The other bill that I've co-sponsored that I'm real proud of was the Jessica Lunsford Act. For years, as the sheriff of this county and as one of the leaders in the State Sheriff's Association, I tried to get the legislature to require that sexual predators who were out on parole, probation, whatever, who were not in jail, but still under some type of conditional release, I tried to get the legislature to pass a bill that would mandate that these people be on GPS tracking. Because everybody knows that you never reform a pedophile. You just don't do it. And they're always going to be dangerous. And if you've got them on probation or you've got them on parole after a valid conviction, then why not keep track of them? Well, the day that Jessica Lunsford was murdered, well, I think it was 2 or 3 days after that, before they identified John Cooey as her killer. John Cooey, the guy that killed Jessica Lunsford, was a sexual pervert, a predator, on supervision. And if he'd been wearing a monitor, like I and many other sheriffs have tried to get in the law, he probably never would have killed her. But anyway, that's my experience in the legislature. I had a lot of fun, and there are a lot of good people there. And incidentally, Dan is right. I was in District 54, and Jim Frisch is now the state rep for me. Okay, I think I've probably said enough. As far as my campaign goes, I invite you to join my Facebook. Friend me, is that how you say it, Dan? If you do the computer thing, go on the computer. Also, on my website is everettrice.com. There's no space, it's one word, everettrice.com. And I didn't bring a bunch of literature or anything to throw on you tonight. But if you go to, right, if you go to my website, you can read about it.
Okay, we have questions?
Yeah, one more comment. I'm trying to qualify for the ballot by petitions. Dan has the petition. It doesn't commit you to anything. It's just saying you agree that I could go on the ballot without having to pay the.
How many you need?
About 6. Actually, I'm sorry, 6,000.
You need 6,000.
But in order to get 6,000 of the ballot in it really takes close to 7. Because, you know, no matter how much we screen it, some of them don't be bad.
Okay, we're ready? I think everyone, I have a pretty loud voice, so I'm not going to use the microphone. Our first question is, would you follow an order from any authority to take guns away from non-criminal citizens?
Absolutely not. I'm a member of the NRA. I believe the Second Amendment.
Okay, second question. How much would Pinellas County pay you via the sheriff pension and your salary as sheriff?
Well, first off, I don't get my pension from the county. I get my pension from the state pension system. And I'm not sure exactly how much I'm getting. Will you ask your questions?
Well, these are from the audience.
I understand.
This one is, how much would Pinellas County pay you via the sheriff's pension and your salary as sheriff? So I take it that they're wondering what your pension and your salary would be, correct?
I think my pension is about $98,000 a year. I don't know what the sheriff makes now. I haven't looked in a year, but it's over $100,000.
I think the point of that question, if I can interject, is we being elected to sheriff then fall under the double dipping that we heard so many elected officials being accused of. I think that was
Yes.
You would.
But
You know, I'm not going to try and defend that and qualify that, but I will tell you that if I get elected sheriff, I'm not going to give him the salary back. I'm just not going to do it. If I get elected sheriff, I will get the sheriff's salary, and I will continue to collect a pension, which it took 35 years to earn prior to that.
Okay. Next question is, what is your pursuit policy?
Run them in the ground. But we got to be cautious. I mean, you cannot be reckless in pursuing criminals. I don't believe in a no pursuit policy. In fact, I got in trouble with St. Pete Towns and some police chiefs because I wouldn't agree to what was basically a non-pursuit policy.
Okay. Next question is, do you agree that police forces are becoming more militarized? What is your opinion on this?
Well, I gotta tell you something, I was at the courthouse today, and there were a bunch of SWAT members or something like that from, I think, St. Pete Police Department. They look like an army. I really think that our civilian law enforcement needs to be clearly distinguished from military force. And this business of all these special uniforms that cops wear, and then more and more they look like the military. I think I don't like it. I'm not saying that I'm against all specialized uniforms, but there needs to be a clear distinction in the way they look between local police, deputy sheriff, and the military. And they look more and more alike every day, and I'm not in favor of that.
Okay. Next question is, the county sheriff is the last line of defense for the constituents' constitutional rights. Please comment on the pressures that the sheriffs are put under with the threat of the federal government withholding funding from any sheriff that chooses to stand on constitutional principles.
Well, I'm not sure if that's a question, but I can tell you right now, I got some strong feelings about it.
Then share your feelings.
Can you try it again?
All right, read it again. Bill, please comment on the pressures that the sheriffs are put under with the threat of the federal government withholding funding from any sheriff that chooses to stand on constitutional principles.
Right, I don't know, whoever wrote that question may know more about this than I do, and I'm not sure of any specific instance where sheriffs have been threatened with or actually lost federal funds because they refused to do certain things. But I can tell you that is a very serious issue. You know, it'd be nice if sheriffs could just tell the government, we don't want any of the money. And over the last few years, federal grants and money from the feds to local police has been dropping off and off and off. But that was always a dilemma with me. Again, you know, I'm conservative. I don't believe in any more taxes. I don't believe in any more federal government than we have to have. But at the same time, as a sheriff, I received a lot of federal grants. And we really couldn't refuse them. But bottom line is that's taxpayers' money.
So if you can't refuse them, will you still stand, if you take that money, will you stand under the Constitution?
Of course. The government's not wouldn't buy me as a sheriff by giving me grant money or giving money down. Of course not.
The reference was in Katrina when they were coming in and taking weapons away from them.
Well, now that's a more specific question. When the cops or whoever, the city of New Orleans or whoever passed that damn emergency ordinance to take guns away from people, that's the most outrageous thing in the world. The people needed it. If they needed a gun, if they ever needed a gun, they needed it then. Who the hell is the government come in and take it away from them? And when I say government, I use that in a generic term, and that includes City Hall, County Commission, State Legislature, and the feds. To me, that was outrageous.
You're on red light cameras. Do you support them?
Let me tell you, this one I do have to qualify. In all the years I was a sheriff, the biggest complaint I got was people would call me and say, Sheriff, we need to stop these people running red lights. I mean, everybody complaining to me about people running red lights. They wanted to know when I was going to do. I told them to call highway patrol. No, really, it's a big issue. But I would not be in favor of red light camera enforcement on red lights. First off, until the law straightened out, because it's not even clear that it's legal at this point, or that it's workable at this point. But I can tell you this: I do not believe that on the first thing is camera trafficking. People should not be, the government should not be able to put points on their driver's license. They should not be able to put them in jail.
It might be that. Let me turn it off, change it, and then you just keep going.
But the point is,
I'm not so sure that it's a bad idea to have a law which holds people accountable for their vehicle. In other words, if somebody's car runs a red light and they take a picture of the license plate, and that's verified, then it's apparent that that car ran the red light. Never mind who's driving. Because in the best conditions, you're not going to be able to positively identify the driver. That technology's not there. So the question becomes, can we hold the owner of that car accountable for the fact the car ran a red light? And I think maybe so. But not for a criminal offense, no.
Yeah.
They do in Europe. I know they do.
Well, see, that's, I think, those things become slippery slope. And I think that's the questions that people are asking about those kinds of things is, okay, you're saying they don't have the technology right now to even tell what driver is driving that car. But what point do they get that technology and how much is that used against us? And I think, would everyone agree that's one of our concerns?
Some of the cameras are pointing towards the intersection.
More concerned about jaywalkers.
They're already taking pictures.
Well, the idea is that they're supposed to, some systems take a picture of the license plate, they take a picture of the violation, and they supposedly got cameras located where they get a good shot of the driver. But
I got no problem with cameras.
One of the
They're
issues
big and
is that
long, shouldn't worry
50%
about
of those red light camera tickets that have an
it.
issue.
Not restricting my freedom at all.
Have an issue with people taking a right turn on red.
Not stopping?
No, that they did stop, but it still takes their picture turning on, right turn on red, and they still get a ticket.
well, I think that's an issue there, but I think they ironed that out. In fact, some jurisdictions apparently don't issue tickets at all for right turn.
Tired of law bridges.
That was the original agreement, but then they changed it here.
Okay. All right, next question. How will the new 508 plus, I believe, 508 plus regulations affect the department, or will there be no effect?
I have a better question than that. Discard
Is that your question?
Yeah, but discard that's.
Okay.
I don't know that any of the 500. They're regulating us to death, as you know, and I don't even know if you have studied all the new regulations enough to know if it's going to impact the department when you become sheriff again. Did I say when? Yeah. But more importantly, I had another question, if you don't mind, if I may. They don't have the law in Florida like they do in Georgia and Arizona, which gives you the, mandates that a police officer needs to verify citizenship if they don't have proof of if they don't have ID when they stop them. Are you in favor of that if that law does come to fruition in Florida, where you can verify someone's citizenship?
I'm strongly in favor of the Arizona type law. I don't see why a deputy sheriff cannot verify somebody's citizenship the same way.
See if he's a criminal.
Immigration and Naturalization Service does.
Right.
If it's a criminal offense, the deputy ought to have jurisdiction over it.
Right.
The problem is, where are you going to put them? You fill up the jail with them, and then your government won't take them.
That's the problem.
They won't even prosecute them.
Yeah.
They don't have the ability or the will to do anything about it.
The will, it's political will.
Well, yeah, we know that.
We closed down a lot of military bases.
Maybe we can put them on some of that land the government's stealing from us. How's that?
Okay, next question. Would you continue safe harbor?
Maybe not. I can't comment. I'm not going to, tonight I'm going to stand here and say yes or no to that because I don't know that much about it. But I would definitely look at it. I have reservations about, obviously the sheriff has got a legitimate purpose in trying to keep the jail from being overcrowded. But I'm not so sure that it's the sheriff's responsibility to run a homeless shelter. Not that there's anything wrong with homeless shelters. The point is that's not a police function. That's a social function. Not something that the sheriff should be doing. But I'm not even going to, I would look at it because of that alone. The first question I would say is, why is the sheriff running a homeless shelter? And of course the answer is going to be, well, sheriff, it cuts down on the jail population. Well, why does the sheriff have to do that? Aren't there other people, other associations, other quasi-government functions that can be doing this? But I'm not committed to safe harbor, believe me.
Okay. Next question. How do you feel about the military and the police working together to police the general public?
Absolutely not.
That was a trick question.
Let me tell you something, if the government, if the United States military, or even the National Guard gets involved in civilian police enforcement, we've lost it.
Yes, we have.
We've lost it.
Okay, next question. Judges tend to make decisions that are politically motivated. What makes us think the sheriff's office is any different?
Because it's Everett Rice.
Well, I don't know. He wrote that question after I said what I did about the judges. It's true that even the sheriff, as an elected official, sometimes has a dilemma between making a legal decision and a political decision. And that's true. But it's much easier for, even though our trial judges are elected, they should never be making a decision simply because they know it's popular. Because the incumbent judge is very hard to unseat. But
Really hard.
The sheriff's position is a little bit more political than the judge's position. First off, judges are nonpartisan.
Yeah, right.
They really can't.
Yeah, right.
They don't run on a political ticket.
Okay, we only have a couple more left. What is your opinion on the latest round of budget cuts and how it is affecting employee morale?
Good question.
Well, I think that that's a difficult question again because I'm not there. I haven't had time to study it, but I will say that supposedly the sheriff, and not the chief deputy, by the way, had to cut like $60 million out of the sheriff's budget over 3 years. And that's a huge hit. I think the budget probably was 200 and some million, and then, they reduced it. You know why? Because they don't have the tax money. They don't have, the county doesn't have the revenue to give the sheriff the money that he claims he needs. My track record as the sheriff has always been that the sheriff's employees get paid a competitive amount of money for other people in a similar industry. I understand that our sheriff's deputies and other employees haven't had a raise in 4 or 5 years. And I think that, I'm not saying I could have done any better, but that would have been a priority. I'd get rid of some of the toys and the other things to make sure the employees got paid first. I would not ask the county commission to raise taxes so I could have the money I needed to give my employees raises. I wouldn't do it.
What the heck is happening in South St. Pete? Seems like a murder every other day.
Called crack.
I think, yeah, it's basically drug related, most of it.
Okay. Next, and this is our last question. Do you feel that Florida's, I think this is GWP, is that correct?
Concealed weapons.
Oh, all right, thank you, CWP. Do you feel that Florida's concealed weapons permit program has significantly reduced violent crime in our great state?
Yes.
I do too.
That's it. I don't know if there's any problem.
I like it.
That's it, I think that's all the questions we have.
You got an A+.